My sick daughter has one last wish, to see you. The wrench slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot, because when I turned around, there was a 7-foot-tall alien woman standing 3 feet behind me, and I had no idea how long she had been there. I am not a man who scares easy. 4 years fixing docking clamps and coolant lines on Kepler Station will do that to you. But nobody warns you about turning around in an empty bay and finding 4 eyes staring back at you, arranged in a diamond across a face made of shifting silver skin. My heart was still slamming against my ribs when she spoke. You are Marcus Webb. It was not a question. Her voice came out flat and careful through a translator disc pinned to her collar, like she was picking each word off a shelf before she used it. Depends who wants to know, I said, bending down slow to pick up the wrench, keeping my eyes on her the whole time. You do not turn your back on something you do not understand, not even something that speaks in careful English and wears robes that shimmer like oil on water. My name is Ashenvel Torques, she said. I am Yashari. I have come a long way to find you, and I do not have much time, so I will not waste it being polite. My daughter is dying. The healers on my homeworld say she has 10 days left, perhaps less. She has asked me for one thing before the end. Not medicine, not to go home. She has asked to see you. I stood there with grease on my hands and a dead wrench in my fist, and I laughed, because it was the only thing that made sense to do. Lady, I have never met a Yashari in my life. I have never left this station in 4 years. You have got the wrong human. Her 4 eyes blinked, not all at once, but in a strange rolling pattern. Top left, then bottom right, then the other 2, and something about that small motion told me she was struggling to hold herself together. 61 days ago, she said, a transport vessel suffered a hull failure in the debris field outside this station's registered lanes. Station records list 1 responder, a dock worker, who ignored 3 hazard warnings, cut through a collapsed corridor with hand tools, and carried survivors out 2 at a time because the rescue sled had lost power. Your name is on that record, Marcus Webb. One of those survivors was a child, my child. The bay went very quiet. I heard the hum of the ventilation system and the distant clang of someone working 3 docks over, and underneath all of it, I heard myself breathing too fast. I remembered that wreck. I still had a scar running from my elbow to my wrist, where a jagged piece of bulkhead had caught me, and some nights I still woke up hearing that hull groan like an animal in pain. I had pulled 6 people out of that wreck. Nobody had told me their names. Nobody tells the mechanic anything. You get handed a commendation chip, a pat on the shoulder, and then everyone moves on with their lives, while you go back to fixing coolant lines like nothing happened. There was a kid under a console, I said slowly, the memory surfacing whether I wanted it to or not. Small, not moving. I thought she was already gone. She was not moving because she believed moving would end her life, Ashenvel said. It is instinct, older than our written history. When a Yashari child faces mortal danger, the body locks itself still, hoping the danger will pass over. You did not know this. You picked her up anyway. You kept speaking to her the whole way out, she tells me. Nonsense words, songs with no tune, promises that you would not let go of her. And you did not let go of her. My throat felt tight. I had not known any of them survived. I had assumed the worst, and never once thought to ask, because asking felt like it would only make the not knowing worse. She was the little one, I said, curled up like she was trying to disappear. Her name is Ithran, Ashenvel said, and her voice cracked right down the middle of that name, the translator device unable to smooth over the sound of a mother breaking. She contracted an infection in the wreck, a fever that lives in the blood. Our healers have tried everything within their knowledge, and it has not been enough. She has stopped asking to be saved, Marcus Webb. She is 7 years old, and she has stopped asking for that, because she understands what the healers will not say plainly. She asks only for one thing now, to see the man who carried her out, to see him one more time before she can no longer see anything at all. I stood there in my grease-stained coveralls in a bay that smelled like burnt metal and ozone, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I had absolutely nothing clever to say. Where is she? I said instead, and I was already reaching for my jacket. Ashenvel's ship was small, built for speed rather than comfort, and it took us 11 hours to reach the medical outpost where Ithrin was being kept. 11 hours is a long time to sit across from someone and not talk, but Ashenvel and I managed it for most of the trip, both of us staring out at the stars, both of us carrying something we did not know how to put into words yet. Somewhere around hour 6, she finally spoke. "You do not know us," she said. "The Yashari. Most humans have never spoken to one of us directly. We keep to our own lanes. We do not trust easily, and we are taught from childhood that outsiders bring only trouble. And now you are trusting one," I said. "Now I have no choice," she said, and there was no bitterness in it, only exhaustion. I watched my daughter freeze under a collapsing ceiling, while everyone around her fled to save themselves. Everyone except you. You did not know her. You owed her nothing. You still went back for her 3 separate times, according to the records, because you kept finding more people, and you kept going back. I have run those numbers through my mind more times than I can count. I cannot make sense of a stranger who risks his own life for people he has never met, and will likely never see again. So I stopped trying to make sense of it, and I came to find you instead. I did not have a good answer for that. The truth is, I have never been able to explain it either. When that hull started groaning, and the warning lights turned the whole corridor red, I did not think about risk. I thought about the fact that there were people trapped who would not get out unless someone went and got them, and I happened to be standing there with 2 working legs and a set of hand tools. It did not feel like courage at the time. It felt like the only thing to do. "Some people just cannot walk away," I said finally. "That is all it is. Nothing special about it." Ashenvel looked at me for a long moment, all 4 eyes fixed on my face, and did not argue, though I got the feeling she disagreed completely. The outpost was cold in the way Yashari places tend to be, kept dim and low temperature, because that was how their species preferred it, and it took my eyes a moment to adjust once we stepped off the ship. Ashenvel led me through corridors lined with soft blue light, past healers who stopped and stared at me with open curiosity. A human walking through a place built entirely for another species. The medical bay was quiet, except for the soft rhythm of machines. And there, in a bed built for someone twice her size, was a small shape that barely disturbed the blankets. I almost did not recognize her. She had been small in the wreck, but now she looked impossibly smaller, her silver skin gone pale and dull, her 4 eyes half closed. Tubes ran from a machine beside her bed into thin arms that looked like they belonged to a much younger child than 7. Then 2 of those 4 eyes opened, found me across the room, and actually focused. "You came," she whispered. Her voice was barely more than air moving. I crossed the room and pulled a stool up beside her bed without anyone telling me I could, and I sat down, and I took her hand in mine, because it seemed like the only correct thing to do. "Mother said you were very busy," Ithrin said. "She said you might not come." I told her you would. You did not let go of me before. I told her you would not let go now either. "Wasn't about to start breaking that habit," I said, and something about the way I said it made one corner of her mouth lift, the closest thing to a smile she seemed to have the strength for. I stayed. I do not know how else to explain the next several days except to say that I simply did not leave. I slept in a chair beside her bed, when I slept at all. I ate whatever the healers brought me without asking what it was. And mostly, I talked to Ithrin, the same way I had talked to her in that collapsing corridor 61 days earlier, filling the silence with nonsense, because nonsense seemed to be the only language that reached her when everything else felt too heavy. I am not a doctor. I want to be honest about that, because this is not a story where the mechanic shows up and fixes what an entire team of healers could not. What I could offer Ithrin was not medicine. It was just presence. Someone sitting beside her, who was not afraid to look directly at how sick she was, who did not flinch or lower his voice, or treat her like she had already stopped being a person who could hear and understand and feel things. On the 3rd day, something happened that I did not expect. A human doctor named Elena Voss, who worked 2 decks over at the outpost's small human liaison office, came to find me. She had heard through the outpost's tight grapevine that a human was sitting with a dying Yashari child, and her curiosity had gotten the better of her. "What strain is it?" she asked, standing in the doorway of the medical bay, arms crossed, studying the readouts on the machines beside Ithrin's bed, with the focused intensity of someone who could not help herself. Some kind of blood fever, I said. Picked up in the wreck, that is all I know. Elena stepped closer, reading the display, and her eyebrows drew together in a way I recognized from years of watching people try to solve problems that mattered to them. I know this pathogen, she said slowly. Or something close enough to it. There was a research paper published 11 years ago, out of a small university nobody remembers, studying microbial life in deep debris fields. Nobody funded a follow-up study because nobody thought it mattered. I read it because I found it interesting, which apparently makes me the only person in this quadrant who did. Does it help her? I asked, and I heard the sharpness in my own voice, the sudden hope I had not let myself feel until that moment. I do not know yet, Elena said honestly, but I know where to look. Give me access to your records, she said, turning to Ashenvel, who had appeared silently in the doorway behind her, and give me a few hours. A few hours became a full day. Ashenvel spent most of it on her knees in front of a communications terminal, speaking in a language that did not sound built for asking anyone for anything, reaching out to Yashari medical authorities who had never once, in all their history, taken a human research paper seriously enough to read it. They read it that day. There was no other choice left. Elena worked with 2 Yashari healers who had spent their whole careers believing human medicine had nothing useful to offer their species, and I watched 3 people who did not fully trust one another build something together out of pure necessity, because a 7-year-old girl was running out of time, and pride had become a luxury none of them could afford anymore. It did not work immediately. I want to be honest about that too, because a story where everything goes perfectly is not a story that means anything. There were 2 days where Ithrin grew worse before she grew better. 2 days where Ashenvel sat in the hallway outside the medical bay with her head in her hands, and 2 days where I did not know what I would say to her if the worst happened, because there is no version of comforting a mother in that position that does not feel completely inadequate. But on the 5th day, the fever broke. I was there when it happened, holding Ithrin's hand the way I had held it every day since I arrived, when I noticed her skin had changed color, gone from that dull pale silver, back toward something closer to the shimmering tone I remembered from the wreck. Her 4 eyes, which had been half closed for days, opened all the way and stayed open. "You are still here," she said, and her voice, for the first time in 5 days, sounded like an actual voice instead of a whisper of air. "Told you I would not let go," I said, and this time when I said it, I finally let myself believe it completely. Elena confirmed it an hour later. The fever was receding. Whatever combination of human research and Yashari medical knowledge they had built together over that frantic day and a half was working, slowly pulling Ithrin back from the edge she had been standing on since the wreck. Ashenvel cried when she heard the news, not the careful, controlled emotion I had seen from her since we met, but something raw and unguarded, 4 eyes streaming, as she gripped my hand with both of hers and said something in her own language that the translator device did not even attempt to convert into English, because some things apparently do not translate, they just exist as sound and feeling and nothing else. I stayed another week after that, watching Ithrin grow stronger a little more each day, watching color return fully to her skin, watching her sit up on her own, and then stand on her own, and then, on my last day at the outpost, walk 3 unsteady steps across the room toward me, before Ashenvel caught her, and laughed and cried at the same time. "You will go back to your station now," Ashenvel said, standing beside me on the small landing platform where her ship waited to take me home. "Back to fixing coolant lines and docking clamps." "Someone has to," I said. "Station falls apart without me. At least that is what I keep telling myself." She studied me for a long moment, all 4 eyes steady on my face, and I got the sense she was trying to memorize something, the way people do when they know a moment matters more than they have words for. "I did not understand you when I first found you," she said, "a stranger who runs toward danger for people he does not know. I have spent every day since trying to understand it, and I think I finally do. It is not that you cannot walk away. It is that you choose not to, every single time, even when walking away would be easier. That is not nothing, Marcus Webb. That is the rarest thing I have ever encountered." I did not know what to say to that. so I did not say anything, and she seemed to understand that too. Before I boarded the ship, Ithrin appeared in the doorway behind her mother, still moving carefully, still recovering, but standing entirely on her own power. She held something out to me, a small carved token made of a smooth blue stone, cool against my palm when she pressed it into my hand. "This is for remembering," she said. "Mother says humans forget things easily, because your lives are so short and so busy. I do not want you to forget me." "Kid," I said, crouching down to her level, "I could not forget you if I tried." "Will you sing the song again?" she asked. "The one with no tune, before you go." I laughed, because I still did not have an actual song. I never had. It had always just been whatever nonsense came into my head in the moment, but I hummed something anyway, made it up right there on the landing platform the same way I had made it up in a collapsing corridor 61 days before that. And Ithrin closed all four eyes and listened like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. That was 2 years ago now. Ithrin is 9 years old, and healthy, and according to the messages Ashenvel still sends me every few months, she has become the kind of child who asks too many questions and refuses to sit still, which her mother tells me is a very good sign for a girl who once could not move at all. I still fix coolant lines on Kepler Station. Nothing about my life looks particularly different from the outside, but I keep a small blue stone token in my jacket pocket, and every few months a message arrives from a species that once believed outsiders brought only trouble, and somewhere out there, a girl who should not have survived a collapsed corridor and a blood fever no one understood is growing up, asking too many questions, refusing to sit still. I do not know what it says about people, that we are the kind of species who runs into a collapsing wreck without waiting for permission, and also the kind of species too stubborn to stop studying strange diseases nobody asked us to study. Maybe those are not two different things. Maybe that is simply what we do. We do not let go, not of people, not of problems, whichever happens to be standing in front of us when it matters most. And every few months, when a new message arrives, I still find myself humming that same tuneless song, because apparently some habits, once you start them, you never really put down.